welcome. Want to talk to you about aging, and I'm happy to change the subject to whatever you guys want to hear. So there are a couple of topics we can discuss here, and Peter won't even know what we discuss because I don't think we're recording here. Right? So we can talk about entrepreneurship, we can talk about moonshots, we can talk about parenting, or we can talk about longevity. So I'm assuming all of you are here for longevity, or do you want to do something different here? Longevity. There you go. That's what I thought. All right. So let me just tell you about, you heard my thing. We have now analyzed over 500,000 people. And there are some amazing things we learned. So the couple of things, we published the paper, I think it's going to come out in Science, iScience. And some of the fad diets, so we analyze the people who actually are on keto diet, how well do they do in terms of their biological age. And it turns out that was absolutely the worst diet. Keto. So keto was absolutely the worst diet. It increases your biological age by at least 5 years compared to your chronological age, right? In fact, there was so much research that, in fact, last couple of months, there are two really interesting research that came out. One was on intermittent fasting and one was on keto. So people who are here intermittent fasting, it actually showed, and it was a very large N of a couple of 100,000 people, that they die sooner. So people who actually fast for 16 hours or longer end up dying sooner. So they did the research for the people who were skipping breakfast and what happened to them. It turns out they were actually dying sooner. Right? Right. Right. Now, I mean, honestly, the thing is, so it turns out that the body, our whole human body, is designed to, it's not that we need to eat. So, by the way, another part that came up was people who eat all the time in less than 4 hours also die sooner. Right? So it turns out that there is not only what you eat, when you eat also matters, right? So in terms of aging, what we learned was there are 5 things that actually matter for aging. And just like the hierarchy of needs, they're actually in the right order. So absolutely at the bottommost is proper nutrition. Without the proper nutrition, nothing matters. You can have a great Ferrari. If you don't put the right fuel in it, it's just not going to drive well. So it really matters what you put in. And there are a couple of things we learned. So I think every one of you already heard, there is no such thing as universal healthy food. And we really start to look at, there got to be people called superfoods. Is there any superfood? And it turns out every one of us has a different superfood, and that superfood changes. So, 6-7 years ago when I started the company, everything that I thought was good for me, it says avoid broccoli, avoid spinach. Like, spinach? I grew up watching Popeye. Spinach was good for everyone. Until I realized that Popeye was not the scientist, right? That was just like, oh my God. So it turns out that spinach actually harms you. For 30% to 35% of the people, spinach is actually really bad because your microbiome cannot digest oxalate, and it ends up turning into kidney stone. Same thing for broccoli or Brussels sprout or cabbage. If your microbiome is taking that sulfate and producing a lot of sulfide, the sulfide causes a lot of inflammation, and it's bad for you. And it changes, so it's not. So all these foods that were avoid food, over time, now they have become my superfoods. So as my body is constantly changing and adapting, it is constantly changing what my proper nutrition is. So it's every single thing we looked at. Avocado, everybody thinks the avocado is awesome, right? It turns out if you have high uric acid production, it does not work well because it ends up causing gall. Same thing with turmeric. We looked at turmeric and say if you have high bile acid, it's actually not very good for you. So we continue to look at every single food and we couldn't find any healthy food. Same thing we did for supplements. We thought, some basic things just got to be good. Like vitamin B3, how can it possibly be bad for you? Especially I'm being a vegan, vitamin B3 is just necessary, right? Turns out that if you have high uric acid, that's not what you want. Now, there is a lot of research people talk about on NAD, NMN, NR, same thing. It turns out that if you have high, what does NAD, NR, or NMN does? It increases the mitochondrial biogenesis that produces more reactive oxygen species, ROS. If you have high cellular senescence or high inflammation, that's the last thing you want to do. Right? So it actually ends up causing harm. And even though there is some people are saying that, well, the research is not compatible with what they believe, so they're saying research has to be bogus because it shows people who take NR or NMN, they actually have a higher cancer progression. And obviously, if it conflicts with you, what do? Call it a bullshit. Right? So a lot of people who were selling NR and NMN, and now they're saying, oh, that research is no good because you should keep buying it. And our feeling really has always been is there's no such thing. Everyone should figure out what is it good for them and reanalyze themselves because our bodies are constantly changing. Now, as I mentioned, 99% of our genes are actually microbial genes, 100 trillion of them, right? 22,000 human genes and about 2 million to 20 million microbial genes. And they fundamentally change everything we do. Now, people think of them as a parasite. Well, it turns out this is really how human body was designed. We were symbiotic, right? So if you take the egocentric approach of us as humans, these organisms have been around for 3.5 billion years before there was any inkling of humans. One could argue they knew how to take many of the nutrition from the soil and everything else and convert them into what they needed for energy. What if, now this is obviously tongue-in-cheek, what if the microorganism actually created humans to carry us around, right? And imagine this conversation happening between the microorganisms, right? So million or so years ago, all these microorganisms getting together and say, we are sick and tired of living in this small space. We want to take over the world. And the young ones are always a smart one. Young one says, Master, I have an idea. What's your idea? What if we can create something bipedal? And the trillions of us could live inside them. Nice and warm place. And guess what? We can control their brain to make them eat what we want to eat. We can make them think they want it. We make them feel hungry when we want to eat. We make them feel full when we are full. And they created this bipedal, and they came up with a great name called humans. Right? And they created this humans, and as soon as the humans were created, they started to worry, oh my God, just like AI, have we created a monster here? What if these humans start to develop a brain? God forbid they can develop a brain. What's going to happen to us? Are they going to kill us all? And the master says, no, don't you worry. We put all the controls in place. Master, what have you done now? Well, inside their own cell, this thing they call mitochondria. This is our ancient brother we're going to put right inside their cell. And that's the one that's going to generate all the energy for their cells. And we, like a brother, we're going to constantly communicate with them. So anytime they're not taking good care of us, we tell our brothers to just shut the energy down, and they're dead. Master, that's beautiful. But however, you're not thinking about the brain part. Oh, we thought about that. What have you done, Master? We remember most of us are living in the gut. We put a direct connection to their brain. And these idiots, humans, they call them a vagus nerve, thinking like a Las Vegas, what happens in the gut is going to stay in the gut. How stupid of them. What happens in the gut goes everywhere. We literally now, by the way, all tongue-in-cheek, but now we actually have the scientific proof that our gut, the microbiome in our gut, control our depression. So if you just look at the research, microbiome and depression, just in the last 60 days, there are at least 4 papers came out that shows literally how our gut microbiome is involved in depression, anxiety, in terms of our decision making. They control what foods we get addicted to. So much so, they did the research on people who were addicted to alcohol. And all they did was change their microbiome. Now you wonder how you change their microbiome. It's called fecal transplant. They literally, and you wonder how does a fecal transplant happens? There are two ways, front door or the back door. Right? And that's literally how they do. They give you antibiotics, you can take a poop capsule, or they do the other way around. But they put some healthy person's poop, and suddenly these people became non-addicted. Did the same thing on cancer therapies. So remember you talked about how immunotherapy works for about 1/3 of the people, didn't work for 2/3. These were melanoma patients. And they took the poop of the people where it works and gave it to the people where it did not work. And the same immunotherapy started working. So imagine, these things now are directly being shown for every cancer, every disease. So you can literally, Parkinson's and microbiome. And by the way, it's not just the gut microbiome. It turns out your oral microbiome is just as important, if not more. So what we are learning is, when my mom used to always say, eat slowly and chew your food. And I was wondering, like, Mom, do you think it's going to get stuck in my throat or something? But guess what? No. She was a scientist. She knew when you chew your food, your oral microbiome is pre-digesting the food. It is actually making the food available for nutrition along your intestinal lining. But more than that, it's also sending the signal to the rest of the body of what is coming down. So when you eat sweet, or God forbid, I hope you guys don't take artificial sweeteners here, the Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi. Okay, that is the really, really bad stuff. And here's what happens. When you take a diet stuff, the body, your tongue sends a signal, the sweet stuff is coming. Pancreas starts to release tons of insulin. And all that insulin, there is nothing to do, there is no glucose. And now your body is pumped with all the insulin. Over time, it becomes insulin resistance. And that's literally one of the causes of diabetes. Right? So everything that we are doing now, we need to rethink about what it all means. So, and that's the reason in fact, your heart disease, cardiovascular disease, your oral microbiome actually produces nitric oxide. And your nitric oxide dilates your things. So cardiovascular things is all in your oral microbiome. People, sexual health, nitric oxide, adjust your oral microbiome. I mean, that's really all that stuff you're starting to learn is how our oral microbiome, our gut microbiome, our skin microbiome, our nasal microbiome, our ear microbiome, all of these things are impacting our human body, right? So, that's the part, is just the nutrition part. What is the second part? The second part that we need to do after we get nutrition right is stress. You heard stress is like inflammation. Why do we even have stress? When we were all living in the savannas of Africa, the only time we had stress was when the tiger was chasing us, right? At that time, your body, when you're stressed, it goes into fight or flight response. What happens during the fight or flight response? It shuts down all the non-essential systems, right? What's the non-essential system? Digestion. Don't worry about digesting your food. You're about to be a lunch for someone else. Right? It shuts down your immune system. Don't need to worry about that right now. And that's the reason people who are stressed, they get sick more often. They get disease more often, right? They don't digest the food well. So now, when you are in fight or flight response, we humans are pretty clever. We started this thing called religion. So before we eat, what do? Let's do some prayer. Let's do some gratitude. Why do we do that? To move the body from the sympathetic mode into parasympathetic mode, right? Because you moved away from fight or flight response so you can digest your food. So we do the gratitude, we do the praying so that we can actually no longer stress. Now, we need to get to the root cause of stress. Stress used to be really good, which is really got us out of not getting eaten by a tiger. Today we live in this world Just come in the front so people in the back can just come in too. We live in this world, we are constantly stressed, right? We go to work, our boss stresses us out. I'm not one of those bosses, in case you're wondering. You go home, your spouse stresses you out, right? Right. And I am not suggesting what to do here, but you all know, get the root cause, get rid of it. Right? Whatever it is, reduce your stress. Because the more you reduce the stress, less inflammation you have, less you are on fight or flight response. That means you are now able to digest, your immune system is actually working properly. And then, obviously, as you know, when you're stressed, your brain releases something called neurocorticoid, which is cortisol. And the cortisol goes into your body, especially your gut, and it completely messes up your gut, completely. So people who generally tend to be stressed, they have all kinds of gut issues. They get diarrhea, they get, all kinds of, when you're stressed, anxiety, you get butterflies in your stomach. You never get butterflies in your head, right? Right? And all this stuff that happens because of stress, right? So that's second thing, you just really need to nail that down. The third is exercise. Now, don't be a gym rat. We are not designed to pump the iron 4 hours a day. All you need is about 30 minutes to 45 minutes of just a good fast walk. You don't need to run. If you can run, more power to you. Just make sure your kneecaps, your joints are going to be okay when you get old. But idea is that 30 to 45 minutes of fast walking is really good. Just get your heart rate up and just daily, make it a daily habit. Generally, people talk about 10,000 steps, and I think this more and more the science is coming is about 8,000. It's not a 10,000 is not a magic number. You get about 3-4 miles. So, and more important, really, is not just 10,000 steps. Is really getting up more often. So just don't be sedentary. So it's not like I worked out in the gym for an hour and I'm going to sit on my chair for the rest of the day, or I'm going to lie in the bed for the rest of the day, got my 10,000 steps done. That's not how body works. You really need to be active during the day. Because when you're active, gravity, let the gravity do the work, right? So you really have to be upright. Sitting is no good. The humans invented this sitting idea, right? That's not something we grew up doing. So it's really important to get that basic exercise. The fourth is sleep. Sleep matters. However, this idea of quantity of sleep versus quality, and it's really just like many things in life, quality matters. So it's not the number of hours. I was going to say something else. It's not number of hours. It's really the quality of the sleep you get. Now, it's really, you can train yourself to actually get a good amount of REM sleep and deep sleep. So it's very interesting. I measure my sleep 4 ways. I have my Aura, I have my Apple Watch, I have my 8 sleep mattress pad, and I have a Withings pad underneath it. It measures everything under. So the reason is I want to know how am I sleeping. And sometimes I only get about 4.5, 5 hours of sleep, but I'll get 2 hours of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep. That's unbelievable. So if you can get between 1.5 to 2 hours of REM sleep and 1.5 to 2 hours of deep sleep, that's all you need. And if you need 8 hours to get that, you just wasted good, solid 8 hours. But if you can get them in 5, you just saved yourself 3 hours to do the things you really enjoy doing. So I'm not suggesting that sleep less, but I'm saying get the quality of sleep, right? And sometimes, if you need to put a divider in between, so be it. Just sleep well. The last thing, really the fifth thing, is purpose. And this is really interesting. It turns out people who live a life of purpose tend to live 10 to 15 years longer than the people who have no purpose. Right? This is really interesting, is that find what are you willing to die for and then live for it. And people have always asked me, how do you find that purpose, right? So there are a couple of ways I realize you can find your purpose. Ask yourself, if you had everything you want in your life, the billions of dollars and the amazing family, what would you do? And if you do that today, you will get everything that you want, right? Do something that actually improves people's lives. So what is really interesting thing is every time I start any company, and by the way, this is my 7th venture, I ask myself 3 questions. Why this? Why now? Why me? Why this is really simple. God forbid I'm actually successful in solving the problem that I set out to do. Would it help a billion people live a better life? And I don't do that somehow because I think I'm really philanthropic person. To me, if you can do anything that helps billion people live a better life, you can create $100 billion company. Very capitalistic thing to do. You never wake up in the morning and say, I want to make $1 billion. What do I do? Making money is a byproduct of doing things that improve people's lives. That's simple. What are you going to do that will improve people's lives? Your success will never be measured by how much money you have in the bank. Your success will be measured by how many lives you improved. Your self-worth doesn't come from what you own. Your self-worth comes from what you create, right? Now, this is the part very interesting, and obviously, is that my time is over, or what was that? No.
We are close. We are about a minute or so, and
Okay.
the next speaker's in here in 12:15.
Okay, let's see. So 12:01. So I'm going to give you 5 more minutes. So I'm going to stop right there because I was going to go through some of the why now and why me. The why me part probably is the best interesting is what questions are you asking that are different from what everyone else in the industry is asking? So when everyone is saying the genes matter, you question, is it really true? Can you challenge the foundation of genes matter to say, no, it's really the gene expression? When everyone say microbiome is important, you don't let them focus on what organisms are there. You say, no, really that is a wrong way of looking at it. You really should be focusing on what they are doing because that our body is a biochemical body. Sir?
So periodically you end up taking antibiotics.
Yes.
What is the best way, or what do you recommend is the best way to restore your microbiome after you've taken that?
Great question. So obviously that has been one of the biggest lifesaver has been antibiotics in our human history. When you unfortunately end up taking it, by the way, we give way too much antibiotics to children. Every time they get infection, 99% of the time you don't need antibiotics, right? But we keep giving it, and that's really toast. Every time you take antibiotics, like throwing a nuclear bomb inside your body, it gets rid of everything, good or bad. So to restore, don't take the probiotic right with their antibiotics, because what happens is in those probiotics, you have 8 or 10 strains, and they just take over because there is nothing to compete with them. So the idea is when you take antibiotics, take as many fermented food as you possibly can. So kombucha, kimchi, everything fermented, the pickles, you find anything fermented, you eat it. You can't find them fermented, ferment the damn thing for yourself and eat it. Right. Point is really as much of diversity as you can, and then you can take the probiotics and prebiotics.
What, after the antibiotics are done?
After the antibiotics is done, you start eating more diverse food, and after 30 days, you can start taking prebiotics and probiotics. Yes, sir, you were the first one, but there are plenty here. Glucose.
Is there anything that's
Yeah.
tied into the gut, and how do you address that?
In fact, the glucose is a very good question. It is number one cause, I think everyone has told you, is for inflammation. You can predict which food is going to increase your glucose response. And we, in fact, have built the AI model. So if you go up there's a biome booth there, you can get a kit for yourself today. Literally, we analyze your saliva, blood, and stool, and we can say, don't eat tomato, but you can eat bread. Or don't eat this, but you can eat this. We literally are able to tell you which food is going to increase your glycemic response and which ones are not. So glucose response is extremely important. And we built that without the CGM anymore. And the way we did that was we took 11,000 people, 2 weeks of CGM, fed them 35,000 different food and built a model for that, AI. Yeah.
Deep sleep.
Deep sleep.
Any ideas beyond what you said?
So deep sleep, I mean, again, there's a lot of people who are more, you can learn about more deep sleep. Deep sleep is where all the toxins get away. In fact, REM sleep, you are actually taking your short-term memory, making them into long-term memory. Deep sleep is when your brain actually releases the glial, start to release a lot of that stuff to clean out the plumbing. So deep sleep is extremely important in terms of making sure you don't get neurodegenerative diseases. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you throw some light on vegan diet?
Vegan diet, again, a lot of people think that if you're eating a plant-based diet, you're eating really healthy. Most people forget most of the poison comes from plant also, right? So it's not just the vegan diet. What food are you eating? Food is not a food. Food is bunch of substrates and chemicals in there. And these chemicals actually are interacting with our microbiome. So every substrate in the food actually, depending on your gut microbiome, converts into something else. Pomegranate juice, I think Mark mentioned that. Pomegranate juice can be good for someone. Remember, pomegranate juice is basically allergic acid. Allergic acid in itself is not good for you. When your microbiome converts the allergic acid into urolithin A, ULA, then it becomes good for you. And if your microbiome is not doing it, you might as well piss it out. I think it was too many hands. Just go.
Precision nutrition, what do you think about that?
Precision nutrition? Absolutely. 100%.
How do you connect it? How do you connect the chefs, medicine, and microbiome people?
So how we do it? We actually analyze every single pathway. So we literally go through, when we do every transcript in your saliva, we're looking at all the human gene expression, all the microbial gene expression, same thing, gut and blood. Then we look at all of your biomarkers to say, in a network, what pathways are active? Are sulfide active? Is ammonia production active? Is protein fermentation happening? And then we say, don't measure your vitamin A, B, C, D, because what happens, that's very transitory. We look at this stuff and saying, if you have a deficiency of vitamin D, these pathways should be highly active. And if they are not, that means you may have a vitamin D low today, but you don't have a chronic deficiency of vitamin D. So we literally make these nutrients for each individual every month. We literally analyze and say you only need 22 milligram of vitamin D now this month, and we're going to only put that. And we literally make those capsules with every vitamin, mineral, food extracts. Because sometimes food has multiple ingredients, like strawberry. It has fisetin and it has a histamine. And if you have high histamine, we say don't eat strawberry, but we'll put the fisetin into your capsules. So literally for each individual, it's made every month.
Do you think so?
There is a company called Microbiome that I started. You can go up there right next to where the tech hub was. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. By the way, God has been very kind to me, so I don't need to sell anything anymore. But I do it because I really think your life will change. That people who are here, you can ask them who are customers, their lives have changed.
Why won't we start it at the age of 5 or 6?
We do.
So I think this is something, can you teach us how can we take care of our children?
Yes.
I think this is important.
And
I started at 3 months.
Huh?
I started at 3 months.
Yeah.
We do microbiome test and also.
So we literally, the earlier you start, the better it is. And we literally get the things ready for each individual, and it really changes their lives. We have had people that told us, by the way, we published a paper that in 6 months, their depression clinical level, PHQ-9, came down by 47%, anxiety GAD-7 by 32%, HbA1c by 30%, and their IBS SSS clinical score by 42%. And it's published papers.
Naveen,
Oh, I'm sorry. But okay.
Naveen, are you here for the rest of the day?
I'm leaving around 4:30, but you can come up there with the tech hub, in front of the tech hub, and we have a booth. Come there and you can ask me as many questions as you want. How about that?
Brilliant.
All right?
So
Thank you,
folks-
sir. I appreciate it.